A few months back, I drove the Ford Mustang Mach-E and I really enjoyed it. I don't hate the name, I like the styling, and the driving experience is quite solid. But more is always better, right? So today we're here with more. So this is the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. We've got more power, more punch, a higher price tag, and some concessions. Let's see how it stacks up. Looks-wise, I'm into it. It's basically a thick Mustang wagon, and I can get down with that. You can clearly see the efforts the designers took to tie this into the actual Mustang's design language. The head and tail lights look great. This is a fun wheel design here on the GT, and the badge out back lets others know that this one is just a bit more special under the skin. The GT also sits a bit lower than the non-GT version, and check out the Brembo brakes peeking out from behind the wheels. And the cabin is still a pretty nice place to spend time as well, especially with these more supportive front seats. Sitting upright in the center of the dash is the responsive 15.5-inch touchscreen that's loaded with Sync 4A. Wireless Apple CarPlay boots up quickly, and my music sounds great through the B&O sound system. There's good room front and rear, and the rear cargo is easily accessible even when your hands are full, thanks to the kick a foot under the rear bumper feature, which opens the rear cargo hatch. To make this a GT version of the Mach-E, Ford uses the larger 91 kilowatt-hour battery pack, pairs it with a front and electric rear motor, and then cranks up the juice. You have electric all-wheel drive, and it's routing power to all the wheels to the tune of 480 horsepower and 600 pound-feet of torque. You can jump to the Mach-E GT Performance Edition, which bumps the torque output to 634 pound-feet. Either way, the 0 to 60 blast happens in well under 4 seconds. Ford quotes 3.8 for the GT and 3.5 for the Performance Edition. You do take a range hit though, here with the GT. The EPA estimates 270 miles or 260 miles on the Performance Edition, and that's if you can drive it without flat-footing it everywhere. By comparison, the California Route 1 Edition returns up to 314 miles of range in the rear-wheel drive model. So like the non-GT version, the Mach-E is pretty fun to drive, and the GT just ramps it up as you might expect. That 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds per Ford is quick, and when you punch it, it definitely goes, and I'm driving it in unbridled mode. We covered the driving modes in our regular Mach-E driving video. Unbridled is still here, and it is still fun. The steering weight is appropriately heavy for the vehicle, and it is a heavy vehicle since it's over 5,000 pounds, but that makes it that much more amazing how it gets up and goes. Now, as for the actual ride itself, it's surprisingly poorly damped. The suspension is stiff, which is what you'd think you would want from a sporty ride, but then when you just tune it for stiffness and then don't adjust the damping, that doesn't add up. It reminds me much like when the Focus RS came out, and everybody's like, this thing's a blast. The suspension is way too stiff. And there were aftermarket solutions to help try to make it better, which this almost needs, I want to say. Now, in the Performance Edition of this car, they have a magnetically damped suspension, and I have not driven that one, and I'd be very curious to see how it stacks up to this one. I have to imagine it is a much smarter, better tuned suspension system, whereas this one is just kind of like, you're in sport, you want it stiff, bounce, 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 crash, crash, crash. It's a little bit too much, and it's unnecessary in a vehicle like this. Brakes though, haul you down nice and quickly. They're Brembos up front. The regen feel is pretty good. I'm off the brakes. I'm not in one-pedal driving mode right now, but it still does enough to put some range back into the vehicle. But speaking of range, this isn't quite as efficient as we'd hoped at hitting or beating EPA numbers. And in fact, after a full night of charging, when I get into it, the display reads that I have about 220 miles of range or 225 miles of range, which is far less than the 260, 270 you would expect from a Mach-E GT. That's a lot of miles left on the table based on what the EPA said this should get. It is easy to put miles back into the vehicle though when you're out driving because of the good brake system. If you do need to stop to charge, this can handle up to 150 kilowatt DC fast charging speeds. Now that'll get you about 52 miles in 10 minutes worth of charging time, or you could go from 10% to 80% in around 40-45 minutes or so. Not bad, not stellar. More and more vehicles are coming out on higher architecture systems, which can hit 350 kilowatt speeds, and that is a much faster charging experience. I'm sure the next generation of a car like this would have to be at that same setup, but it's not there yet. But overall, the GT experience is fun. The downsides are the cost to get here, and on the non-performance edition, that aforementioned poorly damped suspension system. but taking corners and rocketing out of them, that part's fun. So is it worth it to pay more for the GT power and performance? Well, that's a tougher conversation. You're paying more for a bit better performance and worse range. That's the trade-off, and it's a concerning one. A non-GT Mustang Mach-E 4X makes 346 horsepower and is closer to 300 miles in terms of range, and you'll spend $10,000 less to have one. The base price of a Mach-E GT is $61,000. The GT Performance Edition is $66,000. Now that's still cheaper than the Model Y Performance, but you don't have the range. On this though, you do have Ford's better build quality, and I know that styling is very subjective, but I prefer the way that this looks compared to the Model Y. And now you also have the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6 in the mix as well, and both of those are excellent options in this space. So do you need the extra power of the GT? Well, to be honest here, I think the premium extended range all-wheel drive model is probably the way to go. You still have sub 5 second 0 to 60 blast. You have a better ride, you have more range, you have the same cool styling, you can even get grabber blue on those models, and you have the same available interior nice to haves. The GT is fun, but I'm not sure it's special enough to justify the upcharge. Hold on a second, we're not quite done yet. Two things happened since we finished our review of the Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. One of them is that Ford dropped off a Ford Mustang Mach-E GT Performance Edition, and the other one is that the blue car we reviewed had to be towed out of my house. So first I want to talk about this Performance Edition car. The reason I want to talk about it is because this has the adaptive dampers that the other version didn't. And I will say this, it improves the ride. It does not solve all the problems, but it is a nice upgrade over the non-adaptive damper having vehicle. The ride feels a bit smoother, a bit calmer, but still performance-minded when you're in unbridled. So it almost feels like you need to spend the money to get this suspension if you want to get the GT version. Otherwise, I don't know if you need the GT version still. And it's only 0.3 quicker because you get 634 pound-feet of torque versus 600 pound-feet. Now, the other issue that we do need to talk about is the blue car that I had towards the end of my time with it became unresponsive. It wouldn't take a charge. It would not let me select a gear. It wouldn't let me go into full power. It said stop safely now, even though it was literally parked in my garage. Said full accessory active, all these warning messages, and some techs had to come out. We had to force it into neutral because it's a rotary shifter, push it out, tow it away. We couldn't clear the codes. We couldn't do a bunch of stuff. We tried a few things. I don't know what happened. I tried the unbridled extend mode and then put it in my garage, plugged it in, and then that seemed to be where the issues happened. They're still figuring out what went wrong with that vehicle. This one here, everything's running fine. That one prior, everything was running fine until the last day. So those are important things to talk about to let you know what we experienced with the vehicle. So on this one, adaptive dampers do make a difference, but is the price worth it? That I'm not so sure about. And the second one, weird battery issue, which, welcome to the world of electric cars.